Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Welcome to the Artist Corner. My name is Ann Stutzman. George Dirolf, painter, printmaker, and teacher, joins us today for a conversation about the art of wood engraving. George's work is grounded in the landscape tradition. He's been a member of the Okram Artists since 1993 and has just shown a collection of prints and paintings at the Clement Art and Frame Shop in Troy. George took the grand prize in the 2007 National Small Works Show for the Tri-County Arts Council. The first print that we're going to talk about today is the print that took the grand prize, and that print is called Sign. So where would you like to start?
This is the cycle of prints that I did. The engravings were begun in the spring. And I was the lucky recipient of a sabbatical from Bethlehem Central. And that allowed me to work for a full 6 months on this project, really learning the craft of wood engraving. Prior to this, I've worked in wood engraving, but never really sure of myself. So this was all about finding the right paper and learning to use the tools properly, and so I had this sabbatical in the spring, and the springtime was the part of the emphasis was kind of a shaker spring, and spring was such a broad topic that I decided, well, I need to focus it a little bit more, and I love our local shaker area here and the history, and I was going to do it all at Anley Pond anyway, because I'm close, I live close, and I come down here and see it day by day. So that was really the inspiration for the nature and shakers. And this print, Sign, is leaning more toward the nature part of it. It's a red-winged blackbird, and these birds around Ann Lee begin appearing, it could be late January. They'll flock and begin finding their own little homes around the pond. I remember seeing them in January this year, and they were in the woods in great numbers, chattering away, and it was really, that was I think important to me to use this bird. So
this was one of the first images
that
came to you, or not?
No, I'd say the shakers were. The shakers, like the winter shakers.
Okay.
But this was definitely in the group. And I began this print by going to the pond and doing sketches of the surrounding area, and that's what I have. Where this bird is located is, these are sketches from Ann Lee.
From the Ann Lee Pond, okay.
And the birds themselves were done from, a lot of times I'd go online, look for photographs, and then I would do the drawings right off the monitor. I just draw from the computer. And so I'd look for a lot of different birds, and what I really wanted to get was the idea of those, like epaulets, the wings.
The wings, the wingtips with the color.
Sure.
Yeah.
And this is the only print in that cycle that has color.
Okay. Now, it's interesting that the print is the reverse of the drawing. So when you start a drawing, are you always thinking which way you want the end result to be? No. Okay.
No.
You don't have.
But occasionally, what I'll do is hold the drawing up to a mirror, and I'll look at it, and I'll see if I'm getting it. if it doesn't work that way, then I will change it.
Okay.
And there's you know, when I bring it to the block, it's a completely new drawing on the block. So I'll, you know, look at my sketchbook and usually I grid it or somehow to
okay.
transfer the image.
To transfer the image.
Mhm.
And then, in order to put the image on the block, what sort of medium do you use?
I start with a pencil sketch, and then I go over it with India ink, which is just a dip pen
Okay.
and ink. Markers or like Sharpies, and the ink, when I go to print, doesn't stick to that Sharpie.
Okay.
It also seems to get obliterated as if I do any proofing, where the India ink seems to stay really well, even though I proof is a test print, and I'll wipe when I clean the ink off with Terp, the India ink stays pretty well.
So you have a diagram on your block, or you actually
Yeah.
have the actual drawing, and then you start to use the engraving tools.
Yep, and the engraving tools are toward the end of this series, when I was working on these, I got so much better using the tools. My drawings were less needed. You need to be less and less concerned with the drawing.
With the drawing.
Because once you start working with the tools, you're following the tool lines that you've already carved, and it has a better evolution, I think, if you just work with the tools.
Well, and then the next print that we wanted to talk about is the Winter Shakers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is the Winter Shakers, or this print is titled The Bonnet, and it involves that whole idea of winter shakers, which is a pretty interesting one of those things about shaker history that really captured my imagination. I'm not a historian, and I prefer to take little bits and pieces of the story, and then, you know, a lot of these are kind of illustrations of it's my taking these ideas in, and then just sort of they come out as images.
Okay.
But the idea of the Winter Shakers is the people that would, late in the fall, decide that they would rather be warm and clothed and fed for the winter, and they would join the Shakers. They wouldn't be brethren at that time or sisters. They would be like novices.
Mm-hmm.
But they were clothed. They were fed, and they had to work and follow the rules. But come spring, the Winter Shakers would generally leave, and so I thought an interesting symbol would be like a bird that sort of flies off. And I chose crows for this image, and the three crows in both the Winter Shakers and in this one called the Bonnet. In this one, they seem to be investigating both the furniture, the shaker sewing desk, and the bonnet, the headdress the women wear.
Okay.
And in a way, you know, in kind of a bird-like way, they're sort of pecking at the long tie, like the ribbon tie, and the one bird seems to be putting his head inside the bonnet and investigating, tasting, trying it on. And so in this respect, it's like the Winter Shakers are sort of trying on this shakerism. And of course, they don't stick with it. They leave.
But can you tell us a little bit about the piece of furniture?
Yeah, this is, I believe it's a sewing table, but it's some sort of work table. And the back is open so that if it were a long piece of cloth or a coat, it could go right through and over.
Oh, okay.
Lots of drawers for the tools, thread and needles. Another drawer down below, and one of those simple, elegant shaker pieces.
It is so simple in design, but it's and even the grain is very interesting. There's a lot of different line in this drawing.
Yeah, and that's it's interesting because it's sort of wood-like, but there was no inspiration of wood. It was more, how can I get a sense that this is made of wood, and using the tools, achieve that effect. So it is kind of grain-like, but it's also a way of creating values, darks and lights.
Okay.
And it just so happens that wood grain has a great tonal range, and so it's easy to achieve in a piece of wooden furniture.
It's, let me just see that for a minute. I'm just wondering, something like this, is this in your sketchbook also?
Mm-hmm.
Because in your sketchbook, it looks like you draw with a much softer pencil.
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it is. It's a whole range of soft pencils, usually like in or in 8B, 6B. They're very soft.
And then.
But the reason for that is I get these blacks.
Okay.
And that's what I really, I'm thinking of the end result. How can I get the black? So this one shows, again, these crows were taken from, some of these have gone to the museum in New York, or down in New York State Museum,
okay,
and drawn from the birds. Others are, again, online. I tried different, I sort of adjust the drawings. This bird wanted to be looking up. I wanted that bird, so I tried to draw what would the bird look like looking up at one of his pals there.
Okay. And then when you transfer this drawing to the wood block, you add so much texture. The texture on the bird's wings, and the texture in the bonnet, and the texture on the piece of furniture, and it becomes so rich.
Yeah, it's you have to have the line in a wood engraving is doing it's functioning as for instance on the bonnet, the way the lines curve on the bonnet, or the way they curve on the ribbon. It's showing both the contour and the roundness of it, but you're also trying to achieve the value, the tonal value.
The tonal value.
So you have, line is really an incredible element of art in that respect. It can convey so many things at the same time.
And now the tones, how do you go from this deep black to something like the grain on the front of this piece of furniture, where it has some of the black, but it also has the gray, and it also has the white. What produces that?
The lines I keep working back into till I get what I think is the right gray, the right value. Okay. And so I may start out with a very thin line cut with a knife-like tool, very thin line, and then I keep working into it with thicker, wider tools.
But how does that affect the tone?
The wider the white line, the more white versus black, so it becomes lighter as I cut the wider lines. It's also the spacing of the line that has a lot to do with it. And in the grain here, the wood, you see like stippling, little dots, or dashes.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So it's really and the lines back here, how wide they are compared to the ones in the front. So those are different tools, and by pushing the tool a little deeper into the wood, I can achieve that lightness.
You get the lightness, and then I was wondering about like the black here, it's not just a line that picks up that black. That's actually the surface.
Yes, it is.
That's the surface.
Yeah.
And the gray, I don't know, I guess I don't understand how the gray evolves from this. It's just...
And it just happens.
It just happens.
Yeah,
okay.
when you put those lines next to one another, a certain amount of black versus white, it's just, that's what I'm striving for anyway. This was one of the earlier prints. The later prints in the series, I really feel like I was able to capture it.
Oh, it does. I think you have a real range of values in this print, and it's just wonderful. Okay. Now, who has influenced your style? Are there other wood engravers?
Certainly, and there were a number in the, probably the strongest influence was 20th century artists. 19th century artists were mostly illustrators, and the actual engraving was done by a team of many people. Some were good at carving textures, some were good at carving clouds or skin tones, values.
Okay.
So it didn't really take off as an art form until it didn't really need to be an illustrative medium anymore. Photography took care of all of that. So just as painting changed, you know, in the 20th century, engravings and all printmaking became more of an art. So there were a number of 20th century influences for me. Rockwell Kent, painter and illustrator. Barry Mosher is probably my favorite influence. He's done, and of course he's gone back in a way to illustration, but he's done it in such an artful way. If you can find a Barry Mosher book, you know, he's done
I think we
new
have
editions.
a book in the library, The Art of Wood Engraving, and he has written that book.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, I think we have a copy
Oh,
of
that's
that
great.
here. It's a great
Oh, I want to
book.
look for that because I'm not familiar with it.
And in it, he does a little bit of a biography of many 20th century wood engravers and their work. These artists are also starting to publish wordless books,
Right.
which is a little bit different from the use of wood engraving in the 19th century.
Yeah.
It was an illustration, but now the illustration is the book. It tells the story.
Yeah.
And we do have a book by Barry
Yeah, graphic
Mosher.
novels even.
Graphic
I feel
novels.
kind of a kinship there. Most of those are done pen and ink, of course. But I thought, wow, wouldn't it be great to do like a graphic novel using just wood
Right.
engravings? It would be really fun to do.
I think Lind Ward is
Oh, yeah.
another artist
Oh, yeah.
who's
Lind Ward
done,
was-
he's maybe from the 30s
Yes.
even, he's done graphic novels that tell a story just in pictures. And,
Yeah.
and
yeah.
some of those are being reprinted, so we're trying to collect those
Oh, wonderful.
to build up our wood engraving collection.
Yeah.
This, well, let's move on to another print. This print is called Maple Seedling. The black is so rich in the background. Is this also, this is more nature than shaker?
Yes, it is. Yep. But the idea of really a number of these were done purely because I wanted a graphic image. I wanted something that would really, you know, a tightly controlled but powerful image. The idea of growth, of course, and springtime was an influence here. But the balance of this image is black, and it's got such great power. And really black, very little white in this. Of all the prints, it was the easiest to cut. you can see the white lines obviously are the parts that were cut out.
Okay.
And so there's a lot more black. But easiest to cut, but the most difficult to print of all of this group. And this one I think is a very low edition. I'm trying to remember what the number was. Probably 45, maybe 50. But I had a lot of trouble maintaining that strong, intense black without either over-inking, and a lot of the fine lines here would fill in.
Oh.
If I put too much ink
Too
on
much
it,
ink.
they would fill in. Too little ink, and the background wouldn't be that powerful black. The other thing about engravings, there's you know, some intaglio artists, the etchings, aqua tints are, you know, that's a really intense black. And
Right, or
so
mezzotints.
mezzotints are even, oh yeah,
You get
right,
the
they're
very
velvety.
deep black.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's almost no other way of getting that. This is pretty good, though.
This
I
is-
like it. you
This
know.
is so rich.
Yeah.
And so there isn't any sort of texture on the block
No.
to pick up that black.
That's right. No, it's just the
Okay.
surface of the block.
So you just
Entirely
have to.
relieved.
It's
The,
wow.
the flat
yeah.
wood surface
It
takes
is
the ink.
very rich.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the press
Mm-hmm.
that you print these on. These are not hand printed; they're printed
That's
on a
right.
machine.
That's right. I have tried hand printing them, but what I found is you need such intense pressure. A tool such as a burnishing tool, some artists print them with burnishers, but I found I was always crushing, but to get the amount of pressure, I would crush part of the block, so I would
Oh.
actually ruin the, I've ruined blocks doing it that way.
Doing that, okay.
The press was specifically designed to print wood engravings. Excuse me, it's specifically designed to print type.
Type.
The press that I use is a Golding proof press. And the proof press was used before the large, say on a newspaper, a large full-page newspaper would be built. Small sections of that would be proofed,
Okay.
sort of run as a test.
Okay.
So they would put it on this tiny press, boom, boom, boom. They could print quickly. They could take that back to the editor. The editor could make his corrections on a proof.
On a proof
And then
press.
corrections could be made onto that lockup of type,
Okay.
and then that might go into a bigger galley, big full page for the whole page. Well, the press is small. It's about 15. It would print probably nothing larger than 8 by 10. I've never printed much larger than 5 by 8.
Okay.
But it is specifically meant to print type. So it is asking a lot to get that black. And in order to do that, I have to treat the paper very carefully. I soak it with, well, rather than soaking it in a pan, I actually spray it lightly with water.
Okay. So it has
and
to
I-
be a little bit damp.
Just slightly damp. Yep.
Okay.
And that gives me the best black. I ink each one separately. I have the press is it's meant to set up with rollers, that it rolls the ink onto the block,
Okay.
and then the press will print one after another. As long as you feed the paper in, take the
Okay.
old one out, you feed the new sheet in, you could continuously print. These cannot be done that way.
Oh.
I really only use the press as a final printing device because it has such incredible pressure,
Oh.
and it gives me the beautiful print. But I can't use the rollers because I'll either over ink or under ink.
So you have to hand roll.
And I take the block out of the press, put it over on my inking bench, and I ink it up exactly the way I want it. Put it back in the press, and then put a piece of paper in and print.
And is it just one impression that you can
Yeah.
take after inking?
Yes. Take it out again, roll it up.
Okay.
So we'll see in that little
Right.
film.
We're going to take a look at
Oh, okay.
a film that of George working in his studio and working on the Golding proof press. And so we'll do that right now.
This is a wood engraving. It is a picture carved into an end-grained block of maple. To print a wood engraving, the block must be put in a frame and locked up. The block is placed between pieces of wood called furniture. Wedges called coins are inserted on two sides of the block. The coins are tightened with a key to lock up the assembly. The assembly, or make-ready as it is known, can now be placed into the press. The paper is put into the grips and printing can begin. The heavy flywheel is pushed to start the press, which is kept in motion with the foot pedal. The rollers ride up and down, inking the block with each pass. Prints are pulled from the press, and fresh sheets are fed continuously. Here's an example of the print, hot off the press.
Now, where did you get this press?
Oh, that's a great story because I lived in Worcester, Mass. And there were a lot of printers that used letterpress in Worcester area. In fact, letterpress is still being used today for your finest invitations. Oh. Okay, if you get invited to the White House, it will probably be a letterpress type setting and printing. The fellow that used my press would do business cards, wedding invitations, birth announcements, and he was a retired printer, but he was working long into his 80s, and when I bought it, he had just moved into a nursing home. So his daughter, excuse me, his daughter had this press in her garage, and she put an ad in the paper, and I saw it, and for $100, I got to take it away. Well, that would have been great, except that the press weighs close to 1,000 pounds. And so I thought, you know, I'll just borrow a friend's truck, get it, you know, somehow we'll go over there. And I brought a buddy of mine. We went over to look at it. And as I'm talking with the woman about how much it's going to cost, that kind of thing, I see my friend over her shoulder. And he's in the garage. And I brought a big guy along, okay? I thought he would help me. He's looking to see where the thing is bolted to the floor. Oh. Because he can't move it.
Oh my gosh.
And it wasn't bolted to the floor. It was just a lot of cast iron. And it's really a beautiful machine. It was, you know, the equivalent of one of, you know, think of the highest tech piece of equipment computer that you, brandy new, that you can have. At the time, it was the you know, at its zenith. And in design,
it will
it
last
performed
forever.
Oh, it will. Yeah, that's true. I actually have extra parts. There's a few things I'm a little worried about. Some of the big springs that return it to position. Those things are a little sketchy, but I don't think I'll ever put it through, you know, the paces that it would take to break a spring. But
It was
no, I'll have it.
made to last.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It's a beautiful thing. It really is to see it moving.
So how did you move the press?
Eventually, it was my third try.
Oh.
A third try. I finally got a U-Haul, like a little tilt-down trailer, and I was able to put the thing on a refrigerator mover, which we could tilt, pulled it up on the cart, I could strap it down. And since then, I moved it 4 times. I moved it down into a basement in my first apartment in Worcester, and then I moved here 3 more times. And now it's where it is now. It's going to stay there.
It's going to stay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody buys that house, they're going to get a press because
They're
I'm
gonna
not
get the
moving it
press.
again.
Well, it's a great story. Let's look at another favorite print, and this print is titled Equinox. And could you just talk a little bit? This has such great detail in it.
Again, this was like the Red Wing. I'd go to the pond and look for inspiration. And I was taking photographic for reference material, and I had taken a number of shots of the geese that were flying in all spring. But this is I brought the images together from a couple of photographs. One was actually a sunset. I picture this more like sunrise, to be honest, but it was the sun coming through the trees and sort of burning a hole through the trees. And the bird was a separate photograph, and I photoshopped them together and came up with the image, which from the original photo, I did a drawing. So it really sees a lot of steps from the concept to finally putting it on a block. And there's actually quite a bit of planning because you're restricted to a certain size on the block. And it evolves in a way. And each step of the way, there's a change that's made.
Is this done on one block, or is it blocks that are glued together?
Yeah, it's a specially made block that I get from Graphic Chemical and Ink, and it's type high, and that is very important because it has to be even both sides. Both top and bottom surfaces have to be as parallel as possible. And the entire block all the way around should be exactly type high, which is like 0.716 inches.
Okay.
So I get a very, beautifully made block. It is made of a lot of small pieces of end grain wood. And the end grain is important because you can cut in any direction you want. And that's how you achieve that kind of detail.
And it produces the fine line.
Incredibly fine. As fine as
fine
if I took a pin and scratched it across the surface of a brand new block, you would be able to print that scratch.
That scratch, okay.
So it is very fine. This print, as detailed as you may see here, it was one of the easier ones to cut. I really loved cutting it because it was the first time I began to really play with those different numbers of the angled tint tools. Before the sabbatical, I was really just, I don't know what all these tools do. So as I worked through the sabbatical, I did a lot of test blocks where I just cut with the certain number tool, and I would compare, as I printed, I would compare the different tools, and I began to realize what I could do with it This was the first block that I really worked on the idea of values, like in the different colors of the tones of the bird.
And it really does. It's just such a detailed print. And something else about your prints, you're an outdoor person.
Mm-hmm.
It absolutely
Mhm.
comes through
Mm-hmm.
on your prints.
Yep.
And we only have 2 minutes left, so we have
Okay.
to discuss this print, which
Okay. Well,
is
this really brought the two ideas of nature and Shakers together. The Shaker chair, I guess I have to offer some kind of an apology to the Shakers because they don't want to be remembered as chairs. But for me, the chair, in fact, anything that the Shakers made was a form of prayer. For them, it was they would hope that this thing was perfect enough that an angel might come and sit. So they created them, with perfection in mind. But I find that the Shakers were an agrarian society. They were watching the spring season unfold as they would be prepared for planting. And this chair sprouts the pussy willows. Again, another sign of spring. So right from the wood of the chair, the branches break out. And I really feel like as if a symbol of Shaker ties to the environment and to the world around them. That's kind of my
now when I look
approach.
at this print, and I guess I'm thinking in terms of the winter Shakers.
Mhm.
Springtime, the winter Shakers might be leaving, the chair
Yeah.
is empty.
Yeah, yeah.
But an empty chair is also a chair for someone else to come and
Welcoming.
occupy. It's a welcoming chair. So
That's
I
right.
like that about this image, that it reminds you of coming and going, arrivals and departures, and that the Shakers were constantly in flux,
Mhm.
that their organization, new people were coming and going all the time. And it's a very endearing image. And the blacks, once again, are
Mhm.
so rich
Mhm.
that it's a wonderful print. I think we're at the end, and I want to thank you for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to look at these prints and to have you as our guest.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank
Okay,
you, Ann.
You're welcome. Thank you for watching Artist Corner. I hope you enjoyed the show.